Welcome back to day 3 of the Expo. My name's Saxon Phipps and I have the pleasure of introducing you to the former CEO of Facebook for Australia and New Zealand, Steve Scheeler. Stephen, working with the likes of Mark Zuckerberg, Sheryl Sandberg in Facebook in the Valley. You then were a part of the Instagram, Messenger, WhatsApp, Oculus integrations, and you've been acknowledged as one of Australia's top 100 innovative leaders. You're a big believer in technology and the power of technology in helping businesses become purpose fit for the digital age. Working with the likes of Qantas, NAB, Westpac, Macquarie Bank, IAG, Suncorp, Telstra, Wesfarmers, Google, you name it, you've pretty much done it. You're quite an interesting man, and I really appreciate you being here for our expo today.
My pleasure, Saxon. Great to be here.
So I think the burning question is obviously working for a business like Facebook, a few years ago now. What was that experience like?
It was a wild ride. If you've ever had the chance to be on a roller coaster and even if you're on the front of the roller coaster, you can see where it's going. That's what Facebook felt like. We kind of were holding on and knew that, or hoped that everything would be okay, but you were still on this roller coaster that was going at crazy speeds, and sometimes you didn't know left from right. What was the next turn that was going to happen? And so that was kind of the overall feeling. Particularly after I left Facebook, you realized how much of the roller coaster it really was.
So obviously Facebook has been quite a remarkable impact on society and culture over the past kind of 15 years. What was the kind of idea back then when you were at Facebook, and when did you start at Facebook?
I started in 2012 and I was there for about 6 years. And back in those days, that wasn't that long ago, and it was like 9 years ago, 10 years ago. But the difference in Facebook years was enormous. I can remember when I joined, I would have people say to me, why are you joining Facebook? It's not going anywhere. Who cares? It's a fad. Who cares what you had for breakfast? People used to post pictures of their breakfast, their lunch. It seems ridiculous, particularly if anybody over 35. It's like, where's this thing going? But even in 2012, Facebook I think we had about 900 million users on the platform, like 800 million. And anything with that kind of community, which was mind-blowing, has to have something going for it. So even though it was a smaller business and we were still growing it, there was still a sense of this is something huge that's going to change the world.
You spoke of being able to identify that in people, and your role now as a leader in business. What do you look for in the people you hire or the people that you work for?
That's a great question. I actually ask people when I interview people. And I've had a long career. I've interviewed hundreds of people, and sometimes in very senior roles, sometimes junior roles, sometimes they do things I don't understand what they do. Sometimes I know exactly what they do because I used to do it, right? So you're hiring different kinds of people. But I basically ask 2 questions. So one is I say, tell me what I need to know. That's how I open every interview when I talk to people. I say, just tell me what I need to know. And I think that's I use that as a kind of a qualifier. How good are people at synthesizing? Because we all have a lot of complex things going on in our minds, and our jobs are complex. But how do I synthesize that for somebody who may not understand what I do, or who may really understand what I do? How do I think about what they need to know? Because I think that translation, how do I think about what you need to know and how do I translate it, is probably one of the most powerful skills anybody can have, regardless of the native skills in their domain. So tell me what I need to know. And the second question is, why you over anybody else? And if you can answer those 2 really well, those 2 questions, then I'm really interested. But if you can't answer those 2 questions, then I'm not really interested. And maybe I'm making a mistake because if you look at the analysis of how well people interview other people, we're very bad at identifying talent and skills. Like as humans, we're very bad at it. But those are the 2 questions I use to try to reveal quickly in an interview setting, how additive could this person be to my organization, and how good are they at translating what they know? And I assume often that it's at a very high level because we've already screened them. But how good are they at translating those things into impact in the business that we're building today?
It's interesting because that identification of skills is quite a difficult thing to do. To say that, I'm a good communicator, I'm a creative thinker, I'm a problem solver.
We all say those things, right?
We do. But I think it's one of the difficult things, and especially for a lot of our audience watching live, trying to identify that. There might be 16, 17, 18, 19, and trying to understand What would be your piece of advice to anyone who's trying to have that
Yeah.
introspective understanding?
A few years ago, my nephew, who was about 21, 22, he was finishing uni, he was interested in applying for a job at a company I worked for back then. It was a big company. And there was an internship type role. I thought he'd be good. So he sent me a CV, and his CV was 10 pages long, and it didn't get to the point. And I just said, I actually sat down, I rewrote the whole thing for him, and I boiled it down to one page. And if you can't boil yourself down to one page, that's a problem, no matter how old you are. I still have one page CV. And in that one page, you really got to think about this thing, which what are the qualities that organization is going to be looking for, or that boss or that hirer is going to be looking for? What are the qualities? It's not, and that is not the qualifications you have. It's not where you went to uni. It's not what you studied. That's just information. But it's not showing how you're going to drive impact for that person or that organization. And so you need to boil it down and say, okay, what's going to drive impact in this role? And sometimes that's in the job ad or the job description, or sometimes you have to sit down and think it through. So you might sit down and think, well, the drive, for me to be able to drive impact for them, I need to be really good at collaboration. And so then you say, okay, how am I going to demonstrate that in the interview? What are the things, or in my CV or in my covering letter or whatever the communication is I send? How am I going to demonstrate collaboration? And that's where you then draw on examples. You draw on problems you had to solve. And ideally, you draw on where you were the difference between a team or a group, kind of being okay and being really good. Like you were the secret ingredient that made that team more collaborative or more creative or move faster or more strategic or built better code or built better product. Like you try to position yourself. Ideally, it's the truth. Right? It's not just you're making it up. But you position yourself to say, I was the secret ingredient that made that thing better than average. And if you can do that in an interview or in your communication with, in your CV, your LinkedIn profile, whatever, then you've got a really powerful calling card for when you go looking for jobs.
And I had a bit of a moment there when I was listening to you say that, because I was thinking about all the different young people who work for us and kind of associating them to the communication, the teamwork, those breaking down big problems. Leadership's obviously a massive one. And leadership isn't just exclusive to being the captain of a team or running a business. It's almost the leadership of within self. How important do you think leadership is for an individual on that path into their futures and their careers, but also for the individual to be able to make those decisions?
I think every person is the leader of their own career. And I think you need to think about yourself like that if you want to be not just successful, but fulfilled, right? And success is for you to judge, not for others to judge. I always, whether you think you're successful is what really matters. It's not what other people think. And if you don't think about yourself as the leader of your own career, you're drifting through life. And you'll wind up in a place where you might be happy and fulfilled and getting the best out of your talents, but the chances of it are probably lower than if you are the leader of your career. So if you're going to be the leader of your career, then you need to think about, well, what are the things I want to get out of this? Now that might be, you're happy not being the leader of the group. You're happy to just, and some people are really good at being, just getting their head down, getting a job done. They're more introverted. They love to do certain types of things. It doesn't involve, leading people. And those people can be super duper valuable in organizations. Like you need to be clear that, hey, I'm not the leader, but man, I am so good at what I do. And you need people like that. You don't want an organization that's just full of leaders. You need people to not be leaders as well. So there's the different roles for different people. And so I don't just expect everybody to be a leader. But I do think people need to be, and to be able to demonstrate that they're leaders of their own career. Because otherwise, you've got people that can drift, who are waiting to be told, who are not coming to you saying, this is what I need to help me perform better. I always want people to be able to say, it's a contract, right, between an employer and employee. It's not the master and slave. That's a long time ago. And increasingly now, the best people, particularly if you think you are good, you have choices, right? You don't have to just take a job at any company. You can go and take your talents to the best companies. So those companies should be looking to say, well, what can we do to help you? But how can you tell me what I need to do to help you? Don't make me guess. So be demanding. Like when you get into organizations, I mean, maybe not on the first day, but when I say demanding, I'm not saying, I want this, I want that. You just say, these are the things I need to be successful. This is what I'm going to bring, and then this is what I want my company to bring, my organization to bring, my team to bring. And be clear about that, and let your company know that. That shows you're leader of your own career. So that's the level of leadership I think everybody needs to have. The second thing you're talking about is like, do you want to be a leader of people, a leader of teams, a leader of men and women? And I think that's a different form of leadership that's also really valuable. Again, people can be successful without being that kind of leader. But there, you need to be able to demonstrate how you're developing those skills. You might not have to be walking in on day one and saying, I'm a leader. Maybe you're just out of high school, just out of uni. You're not going to be necessarily, that's not necessarily going to be credible in some organizations. But what you can do is start to say, I know what I need to learn. I know the behaviors I need to demonstrate. I know how I'm going to help plug into this company and this organization and be able to add my best. And so being able to demonstrate that you can do that and then show that you can learn, you can absorb, you can change yourself, and you can develop, that's what's really valuable. It's not being up here on day one. It's showing that I can get from here to here over a period of time.
I think one of the interesting parts about leadership isn't that you need to know all the right answers. It's not having all the right answers. It's that kind of continual search to be able to improve and get better. How often or how important is it to be able to be vulnerable in leadership and in the direction of yourself, to be able to acknowledge when you don't know answers, and how to use that as motivation?
I think, and again, my opinion, but I think empirical research evidence will bear this out, that being a vulnerable or a leader that's willing to say, not just willing to say, but says all the time, I don't have the answer, is a more powerful leader than the old school leader of, I have all the answers. And I've been around long enough, I've lived through kind of the old era when leaders used to be, I have all the answers, and I'm living in a newer era now where leaders are more like, I don't have all the answers. Now, that can be hard to do because some organizations and cultures still expect leaders to have all the answers. And so it's not necessarily easy in some organizations to say, well, I'm going to be a different kind of leader, because that may not be what gets recognized and rewarded. I've worked at companies like that, where admitting you didn't have the answer was a black mark against you. I hated that organization. I quit that company. This was years ago, but I quit that job. That wasn't my place. It was a successful company, but it tended to burn people out and had a really bad culture. I've moved on to other companies that are even more successful, but they had different kind of cultures, which were more about people admitting they don't know the answer. And I think there, you need not just to admit you don't know the answer. You have to say, again, what am I doing about it? And that's about continuous learning, being able to ask questions, being able to have an inquiring mind, being able to say, I'm bringing other people around me, and I'm working with other people who know more than I do, who I learn from every day. So I don't have to be an expert in, right now I run a company where we build maps of the human brain based on machine learning and AI. I've got neurologists, neurosurgeons, data scientists, AI guys, engineers, all these people. I don't know what they do. I'm not a neurosurgeon, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I know enough that my mind is open and they teach me. Every single day I learn and they teach me. And then I try to stitch it together at the top, give them what they need to be successful, and then get out of the way. And so that's the kind of leader I try to be, and it's worked so far. It hasn't fallen apart so far, but it's not perfect, but it works for me.
You spoke then of open-mindedness and being, keeping that open mind in the workplace. What do you, in the new world of work that we're seeing now, in terms of the influence which technology is having across traditional industries and new industries and emerging industries, what role do you see technology playing for Gen Zs in their future jobs and these future industries and careers, and how open-minded they need to be to these new changes in the workforce?
So the answer is we all need to be technically curious, data curious. I'm not saying we all need to be data scientists or technology experts. Today, your average person in the street is pretty good with technology compared to where we were 20 or 30 years ago, right? 20 or 30 years ago, none of us, very few of us actually had computers. I can remember when I went through university, I went through high school and university, and I never touched a computer.
Wow.
Through high school and university. And we had card catalogs instead of online, libraries. You had to go in the library and look through a card catalog to find a book, right? It seems ridiculous today. Well, I typed all of my term papers. Every paper I did in university, I typed on a manual typewriter, right? You had to correct it with liquid paper. This stuff, nobody even knows what this technology is anymore, right? It's all gone. That was just like 30 years ago, right? So things have changed. Now we're all, we can all interact with the technology every day on our computers, our phones, okay? But of course, that raises the bar for everybody. If you look around now, what's changing is particularly not just the use of technology, but the use of two types of technology. One is software, and the second is data and AI, right? Those are the two big shifts in the past sort of 5-10 years. You can't do your job, almost any job in the world now, without a command of software, a pretty good command of the software specific to your role, not just Microsoft, PowerPoint and stuff, but specific to whatever job you're doing. And then secondly, what's crowding into that space is how we use data to make decisions. Now, increasingly, data is going to be kind of taken off our plate. It'll be automated. It'll be, you'll have an AI assistant that will help you do stuff. But I think we're going to go through this period where the better you understand how data works, the more leg up you're going to have on somebody who might be next to you competing for the same job. So we all need to become kind of mini data scientists along the way. Anybody watching now, I would urge you, if you haven't done it already, take some sort of course. It could just be an online thing, but something around kind of the basics of data science and the basics of AI, because we're in this era now. I remember the era when the internet started, where you had to take a course in the basics of how DOS worked, or the basics of how the internet works. Nobody takes those courses today because it's so user friendly. But AI is still in kind of the unuser friendly era. We'll get there in another 5-10 years, but right now, I think if you don't have an understanding of the language and how data analytics works, you're going to be at a disadvantage to almost anybody else who's going for the same job you are.
You spoke of data and decision making, and this is something that we do a lot of work with Year 13 around. And data can be kind of perceived as just lines and lines of code or spreadsheets, and to the everyday person, it's like, well, what is data? And how do you use data in decision making? We talk about it in terms of the transition from high school into education and employment, and being able to look at labour market changes. How important is data-driven decision making, and how available is it today?
It's getting more important every day. Your brain, my brain, they're data processing machines. Your brain's a computer. And so right now I'm talking to you, I'm pulling in data. I'm looking at your face, I'm your gesture, I heard the words you said, I'm responding to them, right? That's data. Going to my brain, I'm processing it, and now I'm doing something about it. I'm giving you an answer to your question. So we're all data processors. That's actually not new. But what is new is now we've got computers and machines that actually can do stuff that we can't do, or do it at a rate and the speed we can't do. And if we don't get a grip on that, you're just left with this computer rather than the other computers around you.
You're not upgrading it.
You're not upgrading, exactly. So it's actually not something to fear, it's something to embrace, because you actually already do it today. Now, as I said before, we're going through a messy period in the next few years where the data and analytics and AI is actually not really user-friendly. Just as the internet and computers weren't user-friendly like 20 or 30 years ago. You had to learn a bit of coding and stuff, even just to use a computer. Even before, I can remember those days. It was hard to figure out. You had to learn, as I said, like computer languages like DOS to be able to use a computer. Now you don't have to do that. It's all these friendly user interfaces and touch screens and stuff. It took a while to get there. We're in the same place with AI. It's going to take a while, and data. We have to take a while to get there. But it will get there in a few years' time. It'll be a lot easier to use. So in the meantime, you don't have to learn how to be a coder. You don't have to learn how to read all kinds of data. You don't have to learn. But what you probably need to do is at least learn the basics of how all that works. It's like you're taking a gap year and going overseas, and say you're going to go live in Spain for 6 months. So what do? You take a Spanish course. You don't have to become fluent in Spanish, but you just have to learn enough to kind of get by. How do I make sense of things in Spain when I've got to, get a bus ticket or order a meal or get an apartment, or things that are more complex, right, than just being a tourist if I'm going to live there. And so it's kind of the same thing. What are the different things I need to learn? And then find data scientists or data people, or maybe they could be at uni with you or at school with you, and go talk to them, and get to know their language. One of the things I did at Facebook, which was I kind of just dreamt it up, and it wound up being a really powerful, is I went around to people and I said, explain to me how you do your job. And so I would go to coders and developers and software engineers and AI guys, and I'd sit down and say, you give me 45 minutes and teach me how you do your job. And they would take me through, a lot of that was taking me through how they used, what tools they use, what software they use, how they would show me the data, the code that they wrote and stuff. And they'd say, well, I do this and I write this and I change this and here's the output. And then I shove it off to this team and here's the handoffs. And I learned so much. People just telling me how they did their jobs. And so that's what you should do. Find experts, and I mean experts, just find people around you. Find the nerd, the coder, and just sit, if you're not a coder, go talk to them and have them teach you what they do. Even just in 45 minutes, you will learn a lot.
And how important, running off that, how important is kind of, building a network? And it's not just, a digital social network, but more so a physical network of people you can call. How paramount has that been to your career and as you continue to grow?
A COVID safe 1.5 meter network. I think in the age of social media, and look, I helped build social media, right, in my small way. I think personal connection's even more powerful now than it was before. Why? Because it's more rare. We all know hundreds of people. I look in Instagram and I'm like, I got thousands of followers. I don't even know who these people are, right? And that's kind of disorienting, right? It's kind of sad in a way for me. It's like, I can't know thousands of people, and I don't really know thousands of people. I only know a few people. But getting to know people face to face, investing the time, particularly with when you're coming to points in your career where you really want to learn, just throw your net wide and meet and talk to a lot of people face to face, on the phone, have a conversation. And again, it may not be immediate payback, but that half hour you spend, you never know. Like how you and I even met Saxon. I mean, it was like a brief conversation like a year and a half ago. And we've kept in touch. You call me, we talk about things like, and who knows in the future, we may wind up doing a lot of other things together, or I refer you to somebody else, or maybe hopefully you've learned a tiny thing from me. I've learned things from you. And so it's that direct investment in people is really important. I actually don't thrive on it the way I think some people do. I find some people as natural networkers. I'm not. I have to kind of, not force myself, but it's something that I push myself to do. But it's really been a benefit to my career and my life, just having a really great network.
And I tend to agree with you that personal network, whether it just be something that you share a common interest about, that you want to kind of understand a bit further. And I know you do a lot of work around like purpose-based businesses and the influence. Without it being a philosophical term or kind of idea, how important is that identification of purpose when making those decisions towards careers and work and understanding what truly motivates you?
I personally think it's the most important thing, but again, I live in the luxury of, I'm not living on the edge of the breadline, which at one time I was. So when I was younger, I'm from a pretty just working class background in the States. I was lucky I went to uni, but I got to uni and I didn't have any money and I had to get a job, but I didn't really worry about the purpose of the mission of the company I was joining. It's like, I need a salary here because I need to pay my rent. And so sometimes we're in those positions, right? You can't sit back and say, I'm only going to work for certain kinds of companies. You need to pay the bills. Or if you have kids, you need to keep your job and keep paying for the school fees. Life gets complicated. So it's not one size fits all. But I think if you can, you should, particularly if you're younger and you don't have kids, you don't have a mortgage, you're in a really good space where you can start. And if you got a good head on your shoulders and you've gotten a decent education, if you're lucky enough. In Australia, we've got a very good education system. Public schools, universities are really good. So we're very fortunate. But to sit back and say, well, what do I really want to get out of my life? Where do I want to, not so much where do I want to be, but how do I want to feel? What fulfills me? I talk, in my family, I talk about 4 values that we've got as a family, and we talk about happy, healthy, fulfilled, and together. And happy kind of speaks for itself. It's like, how do we do things that make us happy? How do we do things also that make us fulfilled? And they're 2 slightly different things. I think fulfilled's about a sense of purpose and a sense of of doing things a little harder and then achieving. Happy can just be, sitting back and having a few beers. But fulfilled is like trying to do things that are harder, that push you itself a bit. Healthy again speaks for itself, but it's important. Don't burn yourself out. Your health is the core of everything. Every success in your life really comes back to your health. Look after your health as a priority and that of your family. And then together was just, again, we want to go through this journey together. And so you can think about that with your own family or your own friends, and how does that play into your career? Because your career is just one facet of your life. And ideally, you find jobs, you find organizations, you find roles and teams where it's additive to those four things. It's not subtractive. And it's got the balance. So some people love to be workaholics and work all the time, and that's cool. But a lot of people don't. They want balance. So find jobs that give you balance. Find jobs that give you a purpose so that you love working harder, because it's fulfilling you. But it still allows you to keep your health solid. Make sure you get balance between these four things. It's not easy to get all of them right all the time, but I think it's good to have a scorecard about, how does this company and what it's doing, or my job, how does it play into those four things? And what's your own scorecard, and how does that work?
And I tend to agree with you, because we have this idea of this endless pursuit of excellence, but kind of it gets caught up in a bit of the collateral that sometimes you'll sacrifice your mental health, your physical health, your relationships. You'll do things you don't necessarily want to do. And I think there's a really good book which says that if you divert by 3 degrees from, I think it's Washington to New York, taking off from LA to Washington, you'll end up in New York or something. And it's like being able to actually correct that, and being able to actually understand that you are meant to fail. You are meant to go through those trials and tribulations and continue to work.
I have people come and occasionally talk to me, and one of the issues why they talk to me is they don't like their job, or they don't like the career, they don't like the organization. And within bounds, I have one word of advice for them: quit. Well, before I get to quit, usually I'm like, the first thing I'll say is be the change you want to see in the world. So the first thing is you be the change. So if you're frustrated at work or something, can you be the change that changes your situation? Rather than feeling helpless or blaming others, can you be the change, okay? That's number one. But number two is if you work out that you can't be the change, and that's true sometimes, it's stacked against you. Your boss is a jerk. The organization you're in doesn't value what you bring to the table, and it's not bringing out the best in you. It's not developing you in the right way. And there is they have to put that there's a compact there. They've got to invest in you as well. If you're not getting those things, I get to that one word: quit. And sometimes it's like, wow, quit. What am I going to say? What am I going to tell people? And I said, you can tell them the truth, which is you want to be a superstar, and you couldn't be a superstar there. And that's a truth. And if you can pull apart that truth, and again, a superstar in your life, it's like, I want balance in my life. I want to be impactful at work and impactful in my relationships and my home life. I want to have this balance between fitness and health and work and family. That's not a shame to say those things. I think it's a pride to say those things. And so many times I've just said, quit, get out, and then reevaluate, reassess. Now, sometimes you can't do that because of financial situation, et cetera. I get it, but find your exit path, because you're not doing yourselves any favor by, if your happiness and your health and your relationships are suffering because, and you're not fulfilling your talent because you're wasting your time in this job that doesn't give you what you want.
No, I think that's probably a phenomenal question to end on. Stephen, thank you so much for your time today and joining us for the Expo. I'm sure the audience have loved your guiding wisdom, and we'll look forward to seeing what you achieve in the future.
Great to be here, Saxon, and good luck to everybody watching.
Thanks.
Take care.